Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Warfel, thank you for being here today. I want to start with doing something that we probably don't do a lot on this side. I want to thank you for your help. When you were here last time, you gave me your word that if we sent some tough cases that had no movement, that you would help with those, and thank you for doing that. I have another long list that I may just send your way because when you speak, the rank and file under you seem to move. So, just wanted to say thank you for the help on those other cases. Two things I want to touch on. Number one, the problems in the employee retention tax credit have been well documented and well discussed here today. This committee, in a bipartisan way, along with the House, passed a pretty significant piece of legislation the other day, and at the heart of it was dealing with the employee retention tax credit. Can you speak to how important that legislation was into preventing the fraud and helping the IRS work through the legitimate claims on that? Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's the legislation that's under consideration, for example, that would prohibit ERC claims from coming in after a date certain. I mean, one of the things that impacts our ability to make sure that we're getting to the eligible claims amongst the ineligible is the size of the inventory. And the more our inventory is flooded with ineligible claims, and right now, we're still, once we issued the moratorium, the influx of claims dropped in half, but it's still, I think we got 17 to 20,000 last week. So we're still, that inventory is growing, and it's growing with a lot of ineligibility. So we're helping us pause the incoming at this point so we can find those that have submitted that are eligible. We need that help.
And so again, stating that the legislation that we passed could provide a significant savings to the American taxpayer.
I believe that.
Thank you for that. Next item, and my colleague from Pennsylvania, Mr. Smucker, touched on this, and as he was talking about it, I said, I think he looked over here and looked at my notes. You know, we talk an awful lot on this committee about, and we debate going back and forth with these complex corporate tax returns and high-income earners. But we know that there's a tremendous amount of fraud in the earned income tax credit space, child tax credit space. If you had to look at what you think the corporate fraud is versus the total dollar amount on the earned income tax credit and child tax credit, either through improper payments or fraud, how do those two numbers compare?
Well, I actually think they're both important. I don't have the side-by-side ledger in front of me.
Okay, all right. So, but they're both important.
Both material.
All right. So you have said that you need money to beef up audits for partnerships, complex tax cases where evasion is more likely, right?
Yes.
Okay. How much effort are you putting into, and would you recommend that we look at reforming the tax preparer space and going after the folks that actually are committing fraud at the lower end of the income spectrum?
Yeah,
if they're both there, I haven't heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they have been railing against corporate America and high income earners, but they lack the same religion when it comes to going after people that cheat the system in the earned income tax credit space.
I'll tell you, Congressman, what's very motivating, and I mentioned it in my opening remarks, protecting honest taxpayers who are being victimized and the tax system using them to victimize. So the example that drives me crazy, and I want to make sure that we address it, is a nefarious preparer who coaxes an innocent taxpayer in, promises them an earned income tax credit quickly, whereas they could get it just as quickly from us, and then rips them off in some way, shape, or form.
Sure, the predatory lending practices that go along with this are pretty grotesque. And, you know, I would love to work with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle on a really meaningful piece of bipartisan legislation that goes after the folks that really are committing the fraud at the lower end of the spectrum. It's important. Look, I'm sort of like my friend from Pennsylvania here. We want the IRS to do its job. We believe that audits are important, but they should be fair and they should be non-discriminatory, and they should be at both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah,
So with that-
understood. And that's a first principle we have. We want, just like with the high income, where there's nefarious activity, for sure, where there's blatant disregard and purposeful evasion, for sure. And at the lower end of the income bracket, when we have nefarious actors like the one I just described, that's where I'd like to focus, rather than an audit program that impacts too many honest taxpayers. And I'll go back to this, with the right investments, we can be more surgical.
Look, what you just said, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I know I'm over my time, but when you got to have a program that's fair for everybody. You talk about just going after the preparers, you have to also go after the individuals that are knowingly defrauding the system. And with that, Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. Thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you. Ms. Del Bene?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner.